This is For the Better, a podcast for those working to affect change within their team, organization, or community. I'm your host, Ben Cash.
My name is Lauren Miners. I'm Director of Partnerships and Marketing for Reason One. And this month, because it is Women's History Month, I'm taking over the mic for Ben. And I can't wait to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Jean Hitchcock. Jean, if you don't know her already, I'm surprised, but she is the president of Hitchcock Marketing and Communications. She's an advisory board member for Doctivity Health. She is an advisory board member for Digital Health Strategies, and she is also senior healthcare advisor for Aloysius Butler and Clark. So welcome, Jean. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. As we were talking earlier, I wanted to have you on the show today because you have such a incredible, varied career. And as I just mentioned, with your current roles across the healthcare industry, you've seen a lot, not just on the health system side and the agency side, but the tech side as well. And before we dive into our conversation, I'd love to invite you to just kind of maybe give an overview of how that all came to be and your roles in these different organizations.
Well, thank you for the kind words. As I look back on my career, I am very happy with where I've been and where I am. And I would be lying if I said it was all planned, because I do believe in being a lifelong learner and listening. And listening also means listening for the clues, or the cues. And I think I do a fairly good job of that. So I love healthcare. I love everything about it. I've spent my entire career in healthcare, regardless of the role I've been in. And it's because of a personal situation in our family where healthcare really, they saved my brother's life. And after that, I said, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. And so I have been for 30 plus years. And there's a lot of people, when you talk to them about why they're in healthcare, have stories like mine. Mine's not unique. But I do think that part of what I've loved is because I'm someone who likes to learn, nothing changes like healthcare. So you have to learn all the time, you know? And I love being with smart people. And let's face it, doctors and nurses and clinicians are smart people. So it's a great environment for someone like me who's curious. And it's a great environment in the sense that every day you come in doing good for people. And I can't think of anything better than that. So.
Oh, I love that, Jean. And thanks for sharing that about your family connection. And like, I kind of what we were talking about before we hit record, right? It was kind of like, this is such a great community inside and out. And, the from the providers to the people that, help connect people with care. That's amazing. So you touched on this already, but you have been in healthcare for over 30 years. You've worked with some of the most recognizable systems there are: Scripps, MedStar, Phoenix Children. It's impressive and diverse at the same time. And I'm curious to know, over these different experiences and even on the tech side too, so what changes have you seen in how women are able and encouraged to lead across health systems?
Sure. Well, by mentioning how long I've been in healthcare, you know that I came up through those radical 70s. And so as a college student, there were things that I was very actively involved for advocating in that period of time. I come out of that sort of a background and family and what have you. So, you had asked me before we started, who were some of the people I looked up to? I looked up to Gloria Steinem, one of the first women who sort of went out and started talking about women's rights and things. When I started out in healthcare, what I couldn't understand was how the numbers didn't translate into influence. So 80% of the people in hospitals are female, yet at the top, it's a very small percentage that were female when I started. And that just seemed odd to me, it just seemed very odd to me. But over the years, I have seen how all that has evolved. Back then, women made up less than 5% of the students in medical schools, so we didn't have a lot of
Oh, wow.
female physicians. Now they're the majority in medical schools. That is a huge change from when I started out years ago. Um, the medical technology has advanced so far that, people like me who spent a week in the hospital after giving birth to a baby with a C-section go home in 2 days now.
Yeah.
It's changed so much. I had a knee replaced and it was outpatient. I couldn't believe that. And I was happy because
Yeah.
it was during COVID. So, by a female orthopod, by a female
Oh, that's
orthopod.
wonderful.
Yeah. So, I've seen the sexual um percentages really change in my career, obviously. I've seen more men go into nursing, and take on leadership roles, which I think is excellent. Um, and there's less tolerance for what I will call the what used to be passed off as good humor, that was years ago that people put up with, they're not putting up with anymore. And thank God they're not. And that was before the Me Too movement, but it was part of the culture of some health systems, not
Mhm.
all, so that's a big dynamic shift that I've seen for women as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point to make. And as you were talking, I was thinking too that, even just in our very narrow world of healthcare marketing, I feel like I'm seeing more. I mean, we're seeing more healthcare CEOs. We're seeing more healthcare CMOs that are female. Um, I'm hearing more about men reporting to women, which is like, oh, that's turning things on its head. So, yeah, thank you for your insights there. And you mentioned this because you mentioned having children. Um, there is this myth of being able to have it all. And who knows what that means? What is it all? And from your resume or at least your LinkedIn page, again, you've been a lot of places. You've had a what fantastic career and kids. Um, but we know that that came with uh, tons of challenges, I'm sure. And so, what can you say a little bit about like what challenges did you face, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I am fortunate to be married to someone for a very long time who has been my partner since day one. And so when you work at level one trauma centers, you don't have 9 to 5 hours. And so he often picked up the slack for me, and I have shared with him often how much I appreciated that. I think women do try to do it all, and I am guilty of that at different times in my career when maybe I wanted something and I was trying to achieve something, and I can become pretty single focused. And it's good to have a partner who sort of grounds you and says, "Hey, remember, there's a whole other family on the other side here." I can be very focused. So I think we do a disservice to ourselves. And I think as I look at how my daughter is raising my granddaughters, that there has been a better understanding now of picking and choosing what having it all means, and
Mhm.
there are people who aren't having babies now to their 40s, because they wanted to
Yeah.
have their career in place. That would have been very different when I was when I was young. And so there are women who, my daughter-in-law, had her first child at 41, and she's an executive with a utility company in
Oh,
California. Her
wow.
career is already well established. Her challenge right now is how to deal with 2 kids under the age of 5, and work.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but that's why I go to Berkeley to babysit, from time to time to help them out. But yeah, I think we kill ourselves, where we did back then, and we've had some lessons learned that hopefully we've shared with the next generation of you don't have to do that. You don't have to be perfect in everything. Nobody's perfect. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too, like, I feel like there's more of a dialogue just across the business community in general of being able to set those boundaries, know where your limits are, and women really supporting other women and putting in place different policies that allow those things to happen and being forgiving about, hey, you know what, sometimes your kid gets sick and that like you'll
It
make it
happens.
happen. It
Right.
happens. And yeah, I heard an adage recently of like, if you want to get something done, give it to a mom. And I 1,000% believe in that.
Well, and I'll counter that with all I need in my life to be successful is a wife. I mean, and I've written the
Yeah.
job description. I've written the job description. But, the thing is about that I find interesting now, and I don't know if you've heard this either. I've heard some people who are more in their 40s and 50s talking about, I just don't get these young people. They say they're only going to work this much and blah blah. I go, you mean they're able to set boundaries and stick with them, something you
Yeah.
couldn't do? I see both sides of that argument. On the one hand, I go, boy, I wish I was that smart. On the other hand, there's people who judge that as not being ambitious or not having a work ethic or something. In some ways, it's a lot healthier than the way we did. So you got to look at both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah. I think it's an outcome of a culture.
Mhm.
Cause I've seen it I came from a different industry and the culture was very much be on all the time. And my boss had, at the time, she had two young kids, and she did not answer email on the weekends. It
Mhm.
was just you didn't hear from her until Monday. And some people thought, oh, because she's not doing her job, and I thought, oh, that's awesome. Actually,
Well,
good for
yeah,
her.
when you're in charge of communications at a level one trauma center, you never turn your phone off. Or at
Oh
the
yeah.
time, pagers. We wore pagers.
Oh, I remember those days. Yes.
Mhm.
Um, well, the last time we saw each other, which was, I guess, in Austin,
Yeah.
you mentioned a group that you started, and I think you call it Ladies Who Don't Have Time to Lunch or something like that.
Dinner for ladies who never get to eat lunch because I never got to eat lunch when I was working. Um, but I had great relationships with the gal who ran the cafeteria. I mean, I could order lunches and something would appear on my desk around 3:30 and I'd eat, but rarely could you schedule anything, So everyone
Yeah.
who's come has really laughed about it because they're like, "Oh my God, this is so true." I go, "I know." And so we bring together female CMOs. We only talk about personal stuff. There's no business, there's no sales, there's no nothing, Um, one of the gems that came out was we found out that 3 of the gals had seen Taylor Swift. "My God, what do you wear to Taylor Swift?" And one gal said, "Do you know there's a website for what to wear to Taylor Swift if you're over 50?" I go, "Well, I'm way past that, so give me the website," And I mean, that's the kind of stuff. But the better part of it is
Yeah.
when one of us has a job opening, we send it to this group first, and we look at it, and we go, "You know what? You might wanna talk to so and so." So it's become a informal support group that has
Mm.
really everyone who's there says, how much they've enjoyed it and how much it's no pressure. It's just be yourself. And we can all laugh because we all did the same job, or I did, but we've all know the experience. So it's a fun group.
Yeah, I love that being able to like kind of create your own spaces for growth
Mhm.
and influence and setting the rules or not rules yourself.
Right.
Like no work talk. We're just
Mhm.
bonding on a personal level. That's so important. And I feel like women maybe need that, especially that kind of bonding, that sort of trusted, um, those trusted spaces where you can just be yourself.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I mean, all through my career, I have never hesitated picking up the phone and calling a colleague across the country. And as soon as you say who you are and what you do, there's an immediate connection. And I've never been denied information or everyone's been so generous, so generous. And it's just a wonderful and I'm going to say it's not just women, it's men as well. Um Boston Children and Phoenix Children's ended up being in sort of a hot political spot a couple of years ago, and those folks in Boston couldn't have been nicer to us. We were helping each other out. It was a wonderful partnership we formed immediately out of a crisis, kind of thing. But you're right. I mean, there's two strikes against women who are CMOs. One is nobody understands how much you get pulled in different directions. Any doc
Yeah.
can walk in your office at any time and say, just go off or whatever, kind of thing. But they don't understand sort of the day-to-day life of someone in that job. There's that. And then there's nobody else who does that job in your hospital. So it's not like I'm the head of, I'm the admin for cardiovascular, and I can call the admin up in cancer services and we can swap stories about budgeting. There's not that. You can do it across the country, and people are very willing to help you.
Yeah, because you kind of in a unique space where you're all healthcare systems, but depending on where you are, who you're serving, you're not competing. And so it becomes more of a garden, if you will, of where everyone is kind of cross-pollinating and feeding each other.
You know, I
Very
I
cool.
learned I learned long ago that you better be really good friends with your competitors. And so everywhere I've ever worked,
Mhm.
I called my counterparts up and really developed a relationship because, God forbid, you know, a plane goes down. Not everyone's going to end up at your hospital. And that's exactly
Right.
what has happened in my career a couple of times where um, in a period of crisis, the whole city was involved in caring for people, and you better know those people on a first name basis so you can pick up the phone and help their families find them and keep them informed,
Mhm.
and you know present a calm front to the public.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're all doing the same thing, and that is
Mhm.
serving your community and making sure they're healthy and well
Right.
and taken care of. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good perspective. And also so many other reasons to have that kind of like collaborative approach with competitors because you're always going to be a little bit better at one thing than they are. And like,
Mhm.
it's just that you're never truly, truly head to head.
Right.
There's always a little bit of overlap and a little bit of gaps too.
Well, just remember,
Um,
in times of crises, you don't compete. You know,
right.
who's ever the closest hospital, or if you're a level one trauma center, they know where to take those folks who are seriously ill versus another hospital. So you're not competitors, you're really collaborators.
Yeah. Partners. Um, one thing that And one reason that I brought you on today, one thing that I admire about you, is that you're very straightforward and honest. And I would love to ask, what bold advice might you give to a woman who is either or both early in her career and then midway through?
So I'm not sure if this can be validated by anything other than my gut, but I think when you're the middle child in a large Irish Catholic family and the oldest girl, you got to learn to speak up, or your brothers are going to drown you out forever. Um, My father would tell you I don't suffer from self-doubt, and I will tell you I do, but if I don't know something, I'm gonna ask. And my curiosity has gotten me in trouble sometimes, when you're in, let's say, polite society and somebody says, "What is going on?" So I've learned over the years how to raise my points of view or how to ask a question, but this is how I am. I I don't wanna waste your time, don't waste my time. I have no time for games. I have no time for toxic people. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn, but I reached a point about 15 years ago that I had a very tough lesson I learned. And I said, "No more toxic people in my life." And so if I came up against somebody who wanted to play games, I was out of there. Now, I could do that because I had my own firm at that point, but I've told some clients because of that kind of behavior that my calendar is full and I couldn't work on their projects. Life's too short, to spend it with people who want to play games, so I don't.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about setting boundaries, like knowing I feel like what you're saying is like you have to be comfortable enough in yourself to know what you want, what you don't want. Um,
Mhm.
and I love what you said about asking questions because unasked questions go unanswered and they need answers. I think sometimes we hold back because we don't want to sound ignorant or something like that. But just asking the question is going to get the other person to think, and that's just as valuable.
Well, I also think, I was in charge of PR and communications, and you needed to know the why. You needed to know all of it. So you became a reporter yourself, and inquiring to your own people, why did this happen, or what's going on, or whatever. So you had to understand it, and that sort of inquiry has served me well. I just need to know more about a subject before I can go out and talk about it or anything. So
yeah, it kind of gets you to that discovery point of, yeah, truly, what are we trying to achieve here? Because sometimes it's a few levels deep, right? All right. Final question. You kind of hit on it at the top, but I'd like to ask again, and maybe just within the healthcare space, what female leaders have really inspired your career? You mentioned Gloria Steinem, but are there others?
Well, there are people in my personal life who are related to me, who were inspirational. My paternal grandmother was the first female college president in the state of New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
My niece is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She's going to be the first female commander of Marine One flying the president. And I just sit in awe of that. I don't ever want to be a Marine, but I'm glad I fought for the right for her to be a Marine. And now she has this job. But, I find inspiration from a lot of different people, men and women. There are women, there's different traits from different people, though, that, I really like. I like humor from some, or I might like how intellectual somebody is. But I think you need to always be open to hear people out to really get to understand them and know them. Who am I? I just read an article. Michael Lewis has written a new book, and he profiled a woman who works for the federal government who helped a family out. I mean, she's like an unsung hero. That's what his new book is about. And you got to admire, And then I grew up in the Hudson River Valley. So for some of us, Mrs. Roosevelt was like the biggest role model we had. She was way ahead of her time. And she lived across the river from us. So we knew everyone knows the Roosevelt family and the myth around that, but she was a role model for me too. And then my mother. My mom was a CPA coming out of World War II when there weren't a lot of women accountants, and she was the only female very often in many places where she worked, and she raised 6 kids. So,
wow. And you also mentioned your daughter-in-law, who is high ranking. So I'm thinking that all of the women that are close to and surrounding Jean Hitchcock are in some way extremely powerful in all of their own right.
I don't think we would call ourselves powerful. I didn't mention my extraordinary daughter. If I didn't, she's gonna kill me. But she amazes me every time we're together. She has just become a phenomenal professional. She's grown the business for her association beyond their wildest dreams. And she's an excellent mother. And she just celebrated 17 years being married to a wonderful man who I love. So she is, she's one of the things, she and I guess both the kids. I can't dig my son, right? We are talking about women here, but just proud of both of them, for their hard workers. They have good work ethics, and they have their priorities right. It's they know what they want and what they don't want to do. And I'm very proud of that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jean. This has been an awesome conversation, as it always is. And I'm looking for, are you headed to HMPS this year?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be there.
Great. I'll see you in Orlando, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you so much.
This has been an episode of For the Better. For more information, episodes, or to be a guest on the podcast, visit forthebetterpodcast.com. Thanks all. Be well.